Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Real National Dialogue with myself, Jonathan Mokes, and Paul Berkowitz. Paul, how are you doing today?
Very well, thank you, Jonathan. It's another coolish day in sunny, summery Johannesburg, but I'm dressed for the weather and happy to see you. How are things your side?
No, good, thank you. I'm in the dreary grey United Kingdom, longing for the sunshine of a South African summer, but hopefully we'll be able to get back to your side relatively soon. It's been a while since we've spoken together like this, but glad to be back. And of course, the real national dialogue continues, unlike the other national dialogue, which seems to have gathered a little bit of dust at the moment. But we're back. We've got, I think, two main things to discuss. I mean, firstly, it seems like it's motion of no confidence season in the GPUs in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. Your city of Johannesburg, Paul, is always got motions of no confidence afoot. So we're going to talk a little bit about all of that going on. But we're going to kick off and have a conversation about by-elections because it's another by-election week that we have ahead of us with the ANC defending two wards. But there were some seismic by-elections last month in October, which I think are worth having a look at. So let me bring up some notes on what the results were, Paul, and then it'd be great as ever to get your views. So just to remind listeners, there were six by-elections contested a couple of weeks back on the 15th of October, which we did include in our South Africa brief on Substack week that was and week aheads. And the ANC had a very, very tough day on the 15th of October. They lost Ward 29 in the city of Johannesburg to the Patriotic Alliance. So the Patriotic Alliance grew significantly from 13% to 30% in that ward. The ANC dropped from 39% to 23%. There are a whole host of other by-elections, but I think just given the significance of the city of Johannesburg, Paul, probably let's just pause there because that by-election defeat for the ANC, actually in Soweto, slightly different demographic ward, but it's in Soweto, came hot in the heels of a disappointing result that the ANC had suffered in Naledi a few weeks earlier, where they'd held on to the ward, but I think dropped to something like 34% in Soweto. So again, it's significant evidence that the ANC is in a significantly weakened position.
Definitely, Jonathan. So let's put it into context a bit. As you said, that ward that the ANC lost is the second ward that the party has lost to the Patriotic Alliance just in the city of Johannesburg. It's the third ward the Patriotic Alliance picked up. They also picked up a ward from the DA. And this is all over this last local government administration over the last 3, 4 years. So in the present, the ANC is a little bit weaker, dropping from 91 to 89 seats. But in the context of what we could look forward to in the road to next year's local government election, we know that the ANC is looking vulnerable in the metros, Jonathan, particularly in Johannesburg. We've heard talks in the media that the party could drop below 30% in Johannesburg, maybe even 25%. So what does that mean? It means, firstly, that the ANC is going to struggle to hold on to the wards it has. And we know that a couple of election cycles back, it was literally a ward in local government was literally either an ANC or a DA ward,
Yes.
and then occasionally an EFF ward or maybe an independent. Now the PA is picking up wards. The ANC, if it's only polling 30 to 35% in a Joburg ward, it runs the risk of losing even more wards or of maybe being a party after next year's election where the majority of its seats are ward seats and not even PR seats
Yeah.
because of the electoral system and because it might not even hope to win that many PR seats in addition to the ward seats it's struggling to hold on to. And we know, Jonathan, that on the totem pole, ward councillors are at the bottom. It's considered a part-time job. Very seldom is it that a ward councillor gets elected onto a mayoral committee or have a senior position. Of course, the ANC is good at busting precedents when it helps them, but it means that the party's its grip on Johannesburg behind the scenes seems to be slipping with every by-election. And and I guess we'll talk about this motion and our confidence in a few
Yes.
minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting point that you make about the ward and PR councillors, and something that hadn't really occurred to me until I thought about it just now while you were speaking, is that candidate selection for the ANC is also going to get incredibly tough, because it would have been a relatively sure bet 10 years ago that if you were going to be successful in getting a council nomination to stand as a councillor for the ANC in the city of Johannesburg, you had a good chance of getting elected. Now it looks like it'll be a relatively tough campaign, and with very limited guarantee that you're actually going to make it into the council. Um, Certainly, even in places like Soweto, where the ANC is incredibly vulnerable. So I think it'll be worth watching how easy it is for the ANC to actually start recruiting council candidates, as ridiculous as it may seem to suggest. I think they may actually it may be a push.
Definitely. And let's talk about that a little bit more, Jonathan. As you said, in the past, when the party had a majority or 50 or 60% in the metro, uh, and particularly in its wards, as you said, its historical strongholds in Soweto and Alexandra and in the inner city, you would expect as the ANC candidate, you're going to win that ward. But we've seen, you mentioned the Naledi ward, we looked at the recent ward that the ANC lost last week. Uh, there's no guarantees anymore. So the pressure is on the ANC to actually come up with much better candidates for ward councillors, because they're in a position where every single percentage point, every single handful of votes is going to make a difference to the party.
Mm.
And I'm not sure that, given their lack of momentum and the resources and the factionalism which goes on in Johannesburg and across the rest of Gauteng, that the party's up to the task.
Yeah. I don't think they are, and they don't seem to be focusing on the election, local government election, and again getting their house in order. Because what's also, I mean, let's jump from the city of Johannesburg to the northwest. So in Ward 7 in a municipality called Ramotshera Moiloa, they lost by 2 votes, so it was a very, very tight by-election, but they lost Ward 7 to Action SA. Now, this is even more fascinating than the PA win, because this was a ward where previously the Forum for Service Delivery had performed incredibly well in 2021. As I think listeners will remember, the Forum for Service Delivery entered into a merger with Action SA, and Action SA created the position of Deputy President for the Forum for Service Delivery's leader. And it seems, well, not it seems, it definitely has borne results and borne fruit for Action SA, because this is the first ever ward that Action SA have been able to win. And they didn't win it in Gauteng, where most people would have expected them to win their first ward. They won it in the Northwest. So this is another very, very interesting result, very damaging for the ANC. And again shows that it's not just in the metros where the ANC is vulnerable, it's also out in a province such as the Northwest.
Definitely. I don't think any wards, very few wards are safe for the ANC anymore. There's vast swathes of the Eastern Cape where the party's still strong and it doesn't have any viable opposition outside of the metros, and the party does well there. But yeah, that was a shock result. And it's as you said, born fruit for Action SA. Their merger with Forum for Service Delivery is already working. This is a growing trend that we'll talk about. We haven't even, I guess we've been on hiatus with the Real National Dialogue, Jonathan, but we know, I'm sure we'll speak in the weeks to come, the merger of Bossa, Rise, and Good to form Unite for Service Delivery. Unite for
Not for
Change.
change. Or
Unite for Change.
UFD, the
They've
ultimate
got
fighting
service
game.
delivery.
Yeah.
I've got service delivery on the mind. I guess if we can't hope for service delivery, we can hope for change.
Yeah.
But yes, this is going to be a growing trend. There's consolidation across the board with smaller and medium parties, which again is a more credible threat to the ANC than a an atomized, disjointed opposition. So yeah, the ANC, the party is really up against it.
So let's also shift down to the Western Cape, and you've written about the growth of the PA in the Western Cape and how threatening it is for both the DA and the ANC in the Western Cape. Now, there were two by-elections on the 15th of October in the Western Cape, one in Langenberg, and then another one in, I think it was Swellendam. Now, the PA won Ward 6 in Swellendam from the ANC, growing, and this is just incredible, growing from 1% in 2021 to 51% in this by-election. ANC dropping from 52 to 30%, DA dropping from 34 to 19%. In Langenberg, in Ward 4, so the ANC probably had one of its most successful by-elections. It managed to retain the ward. It actually grew its percentage share of the vote from 37 to 47. The DA dropped, but the PA grew, now not as spectacularly as it did in Swellendam, but it grew from 2% to 21%. Now, again, Paul, we like to prove you right on the Real National Dialogue, but these two results are just showing further evidence of what you wrote about a couple of months ago, that the PA is marching on in the Western Cape. It's growing significantly. And again, I think we're probably going to face a very, very different electoral landscape post next year's local government elections, certainly in the rural Western Cape. I don't think there's been enough by-elections happening in the city of Cape Town to be able to detect patterns or see what's happening. But certainly outside of the city of Cape Town, you've got a PA that's just firmly on the march. And also interesting to note in the news, two DA ward councillors have resigned their seats in George to
Mm.
trigger, and they've defected to the PA, triggering two further by-elections there. So again, lots for the PA to be happy about, and lots for them to look forward to as they progress.
Definitely, Jonathan. PA on the march, as you said, across the Western Cape, to the detriment of both the DA and the ANC. Um, it is positive on the face of it, Jonathan, that the ANC grew from 37 to 47% in Langeberg. But remember, this is a slightly less crowded field in the by-election. So to have the ANC grow, the PA grow, and the DA only dropped 4 percentage points suggests that when it comes to a general local government election in a more crowded field, any gains that the ANC made last week, well, not last week, on the 15th of October, may still evaporate when they face more competition.
More
So
competition.
they can't relax there at all. The Swellendam win would have been a huge shock to the ANC as well. And and I think just one further point on Langeberg, the ANC grew. We did say it still didn't achieve a majority. It still got 47% of the vote. I think that's going to have possible parallels to Wednesday's by-elections, which we'll get into in just a second.
Yeah, so we can move there quickly. I mean, just to wrap up the 15th of October. So there were two other by-elections, one in Limpopo, one in the Eastern Cape, which the ANC held on to, but its percentage share of the vote decreased in both wards. But I think those, Limpopo and the Eastern Cape those two provinces seem to be fairly, I don't want to use the word safe, Paul, because safe is a very relative term, but they don't seem to be at as much of a risk of losing massive amounts of percentage share of votes in those two provinces as they are in perhaps other provinces.
I think the word to look at, as you said, Jonathan, is relative.
Mm.
If we look back to 2021, it seemed, at least on local government level, that the ANC's epicenter had shifted to Mpumalanga. It was already starting to lose big chunks of the urban vote. Um, Free State, there was a growth of parties like Forum for Service Delivery and the Maluti Apofong 16, an offshoot, a faction that broke away from the ANC. But areas like Mpumalanga, Eastern Cape, Limpopo look good. Of course, after MK's success, not just in KZN, but in the southeast corner of Mpumalanga, it seems that center gravity has shifted a little bit west and north into Limpopo. And you're right. But these are all relative.
Yeah.
And if we can now look
Yeah,
at
let's look at
Wednesday's by-elections, there is another one in Limpopo, isn't there? There's one
it.
in Fetagomo Tubatse,
Yeah.
um, where the ANC isn't guaranteed a successful defense of its ward yet.
Yeah, I mean, they're going up against the EFF, MK, and then the SACP, which is been contesting a lot of by-elections in Limpopo, but for very, very low return. So I think in the 2021 local government election in this particular ward, I mean, the ANC won 57%. I think, as you noted, Paul, that in the 2024 election, the ANC won 74% of the votes. So the EFF is clearly the second place, but in a by-election where there's differential turnout and the ability to also register more of your supporters relative to the others, if the EFFs put in a good show, they might push the ANC close. And again, I mean, MK's performance in Limpopo over the past few months has been lukewarm compared to their performance in other provinces, but you never know. But I suppose what would be more worrying for the ANC, Paul, than up in Limpopo is the by-election they're contesting in Govan Mbeki and in Mpumalanga. That's Ward 14. So the ANC is facing off against an independent candidate, the DA, EFF, and MK. In the local government election, the ANC won the ward, but not with a majority. The DA was the second biggest party, and the EFF the third. In last year's general election, the ANC dropped from 47 to 40%, and MK in Mpumalanga, which is their second strongest province, so in this particular ward, they stormed into second place. So potentially, if the DA and EFF play a spoiler role, as you've pointed out, and MK can mount a decent by-election campaign, which we know they can, the ANC could lose a seat in Mpumalanga.
Definitely, yes. So, on the face of it, the two by-elections we're looking at do seem to reinforce the trends we spoke about. As you said, Jonathan, the Limpopo ward, Fetagoma Tubatse, doesn't seem as risky for the party. But this ward in Govan Mbeki, which is centered around Secunda, um, as you said, the party felt below 41% in last year's provincial election on the provincial ballot, with MK just 10 points behind it. So what we might see, Jonathan, is if the ANC does retain that Mpumalanga ward on Wednesday, it will be because the opposition vote has been split and fractured. So as we said, the DA and or the EFF could play a spoiler role. They could still keep MK from overtaking the ANC. I mean, there's all sorts of permutations possible.
Yeah.
But it emphasizes the fact that the ANC's destiny isn't in its own hands, possibly hasn't been in its own hands for a couple of years now in local government elections. And it's it's an indictment of how far this mighty party has fallen, that they'll have to depend on other opposition parties to stop further opposition parties from unseating them.
Yeah. Well, I just reflecting on it, I mean, if you had asked me 5 years ago whether I would be discussing with you the possibility of the ANC losing a ward like the one they're contesting on Wednesday in Mpumalanga, I just wouldn't believe it. It's just really remarkable how far things have come in South African politics that the ANC is facing losing wards in the northwest and in Mpumalanga, let alone in the metro. So again, as we keep saying, all bets are off for the local government election. I think these by-elections are becoming more and more exciting the closer we get to the local government election, and we certainly are able to see some distinct trends. And I think the ANC is on track for a hell of a shellacking, as Barack Obama would have said next November. But again, just to throw in some more cliches, a week is a long time in politics. A year is a very, very long time in politics. But I think worth noting, Paul, that Wednesday, the 5th of November, when these two by-elections are happening, Guy Fawkes Day. So I don't know if there will be fireworks, but it'll be almost exactly a year to the date when many people think the local government election will probably happen. So I think the countdown's firmly on.
Yeah.
So on that note, let's shift away from by-elections to, as we were saying, motion of no confidence season. So I think just worth having a bit of a discussion on the two government of provincial unities that exist, one in KwaZulu-Natal, one in Gauteng. Probably uh, safe to say that both governments have passed a little bit under the radar since their election last year after the general election, because the focus has very much been on the GNU and the various machinations and disputes that have risen in the government of national unity. It does seem that things have stabilized quite significantly on the GNU front. And important to note that as we speak today, being Monday, the 3rd of November, Cyril Ramaphosa is concluding a strategic retreat with GNU party leaders, which I think is aimed at trying to paper over some of the cracks, but also just make sure that people are aligned ahead of the medium-term budget policy statement, and of course the budget process, which already I'm sure is going to start in earnest for next year. But at a provincial level, the two governments of provincial unities are facing a bit of a test. Let's maybe start with KwaZulu-Natal, where I know, Paul, you will very shortly break down some of the numbers that exist in KwaZulu-Natal. But effectively, the government of provincial unity there is made up by the IFP, the ANC, the DA, and then the National Freedom Party, which has one seat and is a bit of a kingmaker in that GPU. Now, MK and the EFF are the other two parties represented in that legislature. MK actually won the most amounts of seats in the provincial legislature. The reason we're talking about this today is they have indicated that they want to bring a motion of no confidence in the current KwaZulu-Natal Premier, Tami Ntuli, from the IFP. There's a bit of procedural issues as to whether the motion of no confidence has passed muster to be able to go into scheduling, but there's no doubt that it's coming. What has made, I think, people in the IFP in particular feel a little bit concerned is that I think it was last week, Sunday, that the NFP leader, Ivan Barnes, indicated that the NFP had lost confidence itself in the government of provincial unity. But then their representative in the GPU, the current MEC of Social Development, she indicated that, and she being from the NFP, indicated that she was more than happy to stay. So there's some weird dynamics going on in the NFP, as it's a very small party, but clearly they're not ad idem. But I think where the IFP is probably more worried is whether the ANC can continue to support it in the GPU, whether its vote will remain intact. And it seems that the IFP and the ANC have made some kind of deal in the past week over the local government portfolio in particular. But yeah, Paul, just thought I would try and summarize as best I can where the sort of GPU sits, but it does look like it wouldn't take a lot for MK to succeed in a motion of no confidence if they were able to shift a few votes.
Quite correct. Good summary, Jonathan. I think it's important you bring in the tensions that exist between the IFP and the ANC within local government in KwaZulu-Natal province. So obviously, there's different tensions at these different spheres of government. Let me just pull up one of our pictures very quickly to give the viewers an idea of the numbers. So if we look at the current seat allocation in the KwaZulu-Natal legislature, and when we talk about Gauteng, there are a couple of very surface parallels. Both provincial legislatures hold 80 seats. Obviously, a majority is 41 seats or more. And the current government of provincial unity, as you said, the IFP here in black, the ANC, the DA, and the NFP hold 41 of the 80 seats between them. They have the narrowest of majorities. Yeah. There's that single orange dot representing the NFP there, Jonathan. If that seat were flipped, and we don't know at the moment what's going on behind the scenes, then you would have two coalitions with 40 seats each, which would, I don't know what the procedure quite is. I think on local government level, sometimes a hung council comes down to an actual coin toss. I don't know if when the stakes are higher at the provincial level, what can happen. But that's a possibility. We also know, Jonathan, that in the past, there've been some attempts by at least a faction or a caucus within the MK to collapse this government of provincial unity. We know in the past that MK's Mervyn Dirks was sanctioned by the party for trying to open back channels with ANC MPLs, trying to convince them to vote with the MK caucus. Now, as we said, MK is very clearly the plurality here, but not enough seats, even with the EFF, to get over the finish line. If they could flip just one or two ANC seats, then there'd be a problem. There would be a collapse of this provincial government.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for showing the nice pictures. It's always so much easier to see it in visuals. And yeah, I mean, a 40-40 scenario would be quite something. It would be truly a hung parliament. And I mean, it would be unlikely if they were able to flip two ANC seats, but it's not impossible. And it would completely collapse KZN and make KZN politics even more unstable. And it's also, bears repeating what we've seen in the few polls that have occurred this year, that MK is also likely to be the leading party in a number of municipalities, including eThekwini in the local government election. So this is obviously a play linked very much up to the local government election, but it remains to be seen. So I think for the time being, the IFP Premier Ntuli is going to be worried, but he definitely has a plan in the sense that I think the NFP person that's sitting in the government, as long as she can hold her seat and is not removed by her party, it'll be in his favor. And then he clearly is making some moves to appease the ANC and keep them on side, but it'll make for a very, very unstable and difficult end to the year for the provincial government in KZN. And then
Definitely,
yeah,
John.
sorry, go for it.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think the weak point and the potential domino right now is that NFP MPL. But as you said, we can't understate, especially as we move closer to next year's local government election, the tensions between the IFP and the ANC. As you said, the previous MEC of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs was an IFP member. They've been swapped out, I think, with the MEC of Sports, Arts and Recreation, because the ANC is very worried that the IFP COGTA MEC was using their position to drive a different agenda at local government level and to push for IFP control of some of those contested local councils. I don't see that pressure going away. We know that as things stand in local government, the ANC and IFP are going toe to toe across most of these contested municipalities, with help here and there from bid players like the DA or the EFF or even Al Jamaa. I see that tension ratcheting up as we get closer to next year's election, and unfortunately, I think that will lend to further instability rather than a reduction in instability within the provincial government.
Yeah, and then the practicalities of next year's local government election will mean that, as you've said, Paul, traditionally it's been the ANC and the IFP going head to head in most municipalities in KwaZulu-Natal, the vast majority of them. MK is a completely different proposition now. What happens when a party such as the IFP needs MK to get over the line and control the mayoralty of a particular municipality in KwaZulu-Natal? What does that mean for the GPU and its relationship with the ANC? I think the impact of coalitions at a local government level are going to impact coalitions at provincial and possibly national level, probably more so in KwaZulu-Natal than any other province. So it's going to be fascinating to watch. Let's shift up the N3 to your neck of the woods, and Gauteng. So Panyaza Lesufi, the premier of Gauteng, is also facing a motion of no confidence. This was set down by the Democratic Alliance. Their leader of the caucus there is Solly Msimanga. So what I think is interesting in Gauteng, Paul, and you'll be able to talk us through the numbers again, is that the current GPU is actually a minority government. It only holds less than 40 of the seats, and the so-called opposition, which is the DA, EFF, and MK, hold a majority. The DA's problem, though, with its motion of no confidence, and to remind listeners, it was brought about as a result of the public protector finding that the Amapanyaza community wardens were essentially illegal, and the whole program had to be invalidated, and obviously has cost a lot of money and a lot of chaos. So the DA has used that as an opportunity to lay a motion of no confidence. They have sought the support of Action SA. They've sought the support of the EFF. They've sought, interestingly, the support, well, I'm sure they have, of MK. MK, I think, has indicated that it won't support the motion of no confidence. Action SA says it wants to look at the substance of the motion of no confidence in a lot more detail. And then the EFF simply seems to say, no, we don't want to support anything led by the DA. So it doesn't look mathematically that the DA has a path to victory on this motion of no confidence. But again, as a theoretical exercise, Paul, just I suppose what this does show, and what your graphic shows very, very clearly, is that if there was support, it wouldn't be hard to remove Lesotho.
Yes, quite right, Jonathan. If the DA and the EFF and MK, as we say, looking at the picture going from right to left, the blue dots, the red dots, the green dots, if they had common ground and common cause, they'd have a simple majority of 41 seats. But to mangle an old idiom, Jonathan, just because your enemy has common enemies doesn't necessarily make them your friends. And the DA hasn't done much to win friends in the provincial caucus. In fact, you mentioned the Action SA's response to the DA's proposed motion. You mentioned the EFF's response. In fact, the article I saw, Jonathan, said that both of those parties asked for the DA to apologize before they'd consider the motion. The EFF said, and I'm paraphrasing,
Yeah.
you can't attack us in public and then ask us for our votes as if you haven't been attacking us in public. And Action SA, I think Mashaba played a bit of a straight bat and said, quite rightly, you should be caucusing with these larger parties, meaning the EFF and the MK, before coming to us as an emerging caucus.
Mm.
Which is to say, Action SA is saying, we can't give you the numbers. We have 4 seats, compared to the EFF's 11 seats or MK's 8 seats. Why aren't you talking to them first and making the case to them? Why are we in it, as the children, as the young people would say? Why are we in it? Um, and I think, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, my take might be a little bit cynical, Jonathan, but it seems to be more performative politics from the
Yeah.
DA,
Yeah.
advancing a motion of no confidence where they don't have the numbers, um, to send a signal possibly to voters that we really are opposed to the ANC despite being in a national coalition with them. We're not like them. We're opposed to Lesotho's waste of money and his cutting of corners in terms of what's legal and what's proper. But they can't seem to convince anyone else to play with them, can they?
No, they can't. And I think you've hit the nail on the head as usual, Paul. It's performative politics. It's to show that, and I think the Gauteng DA has always been a little bit uncomfortable with the government of national unity. And reports from the DA's federal executive and federal council have always shown that the Gauteng leadership and the DA have pushed for um, I suppose the DA to sometimes leave the GNU. So they're probably very earnest in sort of pushing the narrative that they're opposed to Lesotho and the ANC. And maybe the sort of national leadership of the DA has kind of said, okay, well, you can do this on the understanding that they probably know it's not going to succeed. So there's no danger of it obviously imperiling the GNU. It's also, I think, to the conversation with Action SA, I see that there's been quite a bit of social media about the fact that the DA was the party that nominated Lesotho for premier immediately after the election, and I think that was in their heady days of what was described as GN euphoria,
Mm.
where I think there was an indication that the DA was going to form part of the GPU, but obviously that wasn't to be. Now let's end off on your municipality, Paul, the city of Johannesburg, the world-class city that it certainly can be, but isn't at the moment. So there now seems to be a motion of no confidence brewing in the city, but I'm a bit confused by it because it seems to be brought against Dada Marero by members of his coalition, Al Jama and UDM, but other members of the coalition are opposed to it. Is it? It seems that he will be facing it at the end of the month, but probably will survive it. But is it just? It just again underscores the sort of utter dysfunction in that government and in that coalition.
Yes, good old home, good old Johannesburg. Yes, it is dysfunctional. And yes, between the ANC, the EFF, the Patriotic Alliance, and the IFP, that coalition, well, that rump of the coalition should have a simple majority anyway. They don't need the votes of Al Jamaa and the PAC and Good and whoever the smaller parties in the coalition are that are bringing this motion of no confidence. And it is confusing. On the face of it, Jonathan, it looks like the caucus of smaller parties, whose name I currently forget, are looking to flex their muscles, are um, are upset, it seems, about being frozen out. Either, well, the stated dispute from the smaller parties is that Moreira doesn't consult them properly and is flouting procedure when it comes to including them in decision making. Probably true. Moreira hasn't ever been one, at least over the last few years, to follow procedure and do things properly. Just witness how the city, how the coalition led by the ANC and pushed by the ANC, tried to keep Floyd Brink on as city manager, has now reappointed Floyd Brink as city manager, even though two separate judges over the last years have said that his appointment was fatally flawed, not on procedural grounds, which the ANC-led coalition pretended it was just a case of doing procedure and doing things properly, but on quite substantive grounds. So the smaller parties, on the face of it, may have a legitimate concern. The question still remains, why float a motion of no confidence? Why, I guess, succumb to DA tendencies to float a motion of no confidence that has no hope of succeeding, assuming that the ANC can keep the Patriotic Alliance on side, which is not a given on any given day. Part of me, the Joburg pragmatic part of me, the part that it has stopped, I guess, flirting with decentralizing power and the more parties, the better, and we need to have new voices in government, because in Johannesburg, especially, I feel we can say that the smaller parties have let us down almost as much as the bigger parties are pursuing their own agendas. Part of me hopes that this would result in a realigning of politics, at least maybe, Jonathan, in Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni, where for a while the bigger parties, the EFF and Patriotic Alliance, together with the ANC, have had the numerical majority, but have decided to hide behind small parties to sidestep them sorting out their own issues. Again, it's no secret to anyone following politics or this podcast that the ANC conducts coalition politics in a way that suits it, that's not necessarily conducive to a more healthy or functional democracy. So I guess there's many little voices inside me. The one little voice is excited that the ANC's divide and conquer strategy has come back to bite it, probably without drawing blood, probably just a little bit of a graze of the teeth, but maybe enough to get the ANC thinking, if not scared, to get it thinking for a second about its role in coalition politics and where it could do more to foster a more stable coalition politics.
Thank you as ever, Paul, for your insights, which are always, I think, helped by the fact that you are in Johannesburg, but again, as ever, aided by your encyclopedic knowledge of the craziness of Johannesburg local politics and the coalition. But I think for me, again, it's just one of the interesting threads going into next year's local government election was, will the small parties in Johannesburg be punished for what has happened over the past few years? And I suspect the answer is yes, they will be punished. I think we've spoken about before, one of Helen Zille's strategies in this upcoming local government election in Johannesburg is to make the choice increasingly binary so that it's between the DA and the ANC. I think that will squeeze out a lot of the small parties. And then I think there's a lot to discuss as we head into the local government election. But one of the discussion points will obviously be the consistency between the GNU, the GPUs, and I suppose will it be a government of local national unity or government of local unity, should I say? So a GLU. Could you see a DA ANC coalition in the city of Johannesburg? But obviously, it depends on a lot of factors. DA Action SA. So I think that's going to be fascinating, and maybe there's enough of an argument to say that two bigger political parties, for the sake of stability and forging, probably should form a government of local unity to get places like Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni, and others working.
There's a lot of merit to that argument, Jonathan. There's a lot of merit to saying that if the ANC and the DA can find each other, it is logical. It makes mathematical sense logically. There's a lot of international precedent
Mm.
that, but there's also some game theory involved. There's also the mathematics behind Shapley values, which we won't go into, that and the attraction, and we can see it with the ANC, we can see it with the DA in the city of Cape Town as well. If you only need one or two seats, a smaller partner is easier to boss around. You have to share a little bit less of the goodies and the positions. And I think the jury's still out on whether the ANC and the DA are doing the job in the national government of national unity that we hope, or whether all the brinkmanship around passing budget 2.0 and 3.0 was worth it, whether the parties can trust each other, at least on a national level. We say there's stability, we said that earlier today, but we'll see once the G20 circus leaves town over here, and and the new year starts again, whether the ANC caucus of MPs have softened in their approach to their DA counterparts. Um, a lot of factors. I think as voters and residents, yes, we all hope for stability. We all hope for a working coalition. I don't know what that looks like yet, unfortunately.
Yeah. And again, the other point that's occurred to me while you were talking, Paul, is that in the Johannesburg construct, it looks like the DA will be the biggest party at this stage. Would the ANC ever accept being a junior coalition partner to the DA? That would be a fascinating point, and probably the answer is no, they wouldn't. So, so that probably mitigates against a GLU. Paul, as ever, thank you very, very much. It's been too long since we were last able to go through this, and hopefully, as we rush towards the end of the year, we can make these a little more frequent, as we will and need to, because there's more by-elections. As you say, there's the G20, which we need to talk about. There's the medium-term budget policy statement coming up on the 12th of November. And goodness knows what else happening in terms of motions and no confidence. So certainly, as ever in South African politics, there is never a dull moment, and we will have a lot to discuss as we proceed. So, Paul, thank you very, very much, and have a great week ahead.
Thank you, Jonathan. Echoing your sentiment, it's been too long. Let's do it frequently. We of course, as always, love to hear more from you viewers about what you like and what you'd like us to talk about. I hope you have missed us as much as we have missed you and each other. And yes, look forward to doing this again much sooner rather than later, Jonathan.
Fantastic, Paul. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye.